Hello, my name is Scott Davis, and I am the course captain for Math 1420 at Arapahoe Community College, ACC. And this is a presentation about what it would look like from a student perspective if who was taking an online course through us. I house the master right now, and so I'm putting this together from the trig perspective, but our pre-calc perspective looks exactly the same because our pre-calc class is essentially all the trig stuff at the beginning, and then at the end of the semester, we add in an algebra unit. So it's really going to look the same. So this one video is going to kind of represent both of them. So I am impersonating a student, so that way, if all the links work, this is exactly what a student would look like, not a teacher version of it at all. So first off, each week there are some announcements that kind of go through, like week 4, if this is where we're at. And so I just kind of bump this ahead. I'm not actually teaching it, so I haven't adjusted the dates to kind of mimic exactly this semester. This was from last semester. But if we are on week 4, each week has kind of just a quick summary of here's what's going on, here's the material that we're covering. So we're ending unit 1 and beginning unit 2. And so with that has specific kind of links to material in the content. All the content stuff is there. I try to do it so the students don't have to go and find everything. Everything that they need is going to be in these kind of weekly announcements, or every unit has a plethora of kind of materials for it. And so this is finishing one unit, and so there's a blank note. So if you kind of look at each unit is set up the same. So if you look at unit 1, it's set up the same as unit 2. That there is a blank note. This is what we would hand out in our face-to-face class. And so there's a PDF of kind of here's the unit 1 or unit 2 notes. So 201, here's all the notes associated with it. 202, here's the notes associated with it. And then each one of those units has a filled out version. Some students might find helpful that they have access to. The teachers do as well, so that way that they don't have to necessarily recreate the wheel for their notes, but they can, if they're going through their own notes and they have questions on things, here's potentially can answer some questions. All of the videos are here. So like this 2.01 is basically videos broken up in going over the notes from 2.01. And so rather than having one big, long, giant lesson on it, it's all kind of broken into individual ones, ranging between 5 and 10 minutes, just so that way a student's not going to have to look for this specific thing and have to scroll through that 45 minutes to try to figure out where it is. They could just click on it and potentially it's a 5-minute video. So they can find all the videos for every single topic that they're going to see in the notes on every single unit is all right here. And then they can also don't have to be in D2L to watch those videos. They can download this PDF, and here are the links to all those videos as well. Right. And this one actually has a timestamp kind of on them so they can know what kind of commitment they got going on with it. So, so every unit has that resource. Every week has these announcements. And then within these announcements, there's a bad math joke, which is wonderful. And then they have kind of what I have bolded is here are things they're going to be due this week. And then things at the end that are not bolded are things they're going to be seeing in the next week. Right, so not too far out, but just to kind of get them thinking. So like if you go back a week, here's all that information that relates to the test and the quiz and the detective work and the test, which is now bolded this week because it's due. And so the only piece of this that is done within D2L is this detective work, which is a discussion. I'll go up and click on that and show you what that looks like in a minute. But so like last week, this was future stuff that they should be focusing on. And then this is stuff that's due that week. Right. And so, and then within there, they had some guided note packet, the filled out version, which is the same as these pieces. So it's all in there rather than them having to go to find the content. The content's there, so they don't have to go and find it. And so each unit has all of this information, and each week kind of comes up with new stuff. And so if I keep scrolling down, here was unit 1. And then if we show all the announcements that they would have seen so far, if we go down to the very beginning, so this was like weeks 1 stuff. And then prior to that would have been like, here's the introduction to this whole class. That just a quick talking about, here's a D2L. A lot of the stuff is going to be in what we call Delta Math as our homework platform. And this is all I have to do for them to set it up is I just kind of update that link. And that link, they click on it, and that instantly will take them to D2L. And then they can register in and they're in the class, and that's it, no cost for them. And then this video is a D2L or a Delta Math tutorial made by Delta Math to just kind of show you, here's what the homework looks like, here's where you find homework, and kind of the layout of what Delta Math is. And then this is a link to the syllabus. There it is. So a PDF of that syllabus, and then a PDF of the calendar. So this is kind of the dates and everything going through. So I did not adjust all the stuff within the announcements to kind of match and mirror these things. But so if a student were to look in the content, everything is there. So like if they go to the syllabus stuff, that link, it's always there. That link may kind of, that announcement may fall off or may get down somewhere where they kind of have a hard time finding it, but it's always in the content. Calendar's there. When they go to each of the units is set up exactly the same, where it's notes, review, right? So here's that Word document, but typically we end up hiding that. So if you go to the first one, typically we hide the Word document version of it because sometimes things don't just print real well with a Word document with different people's computers and everything, but a PDF works a lot better. So we link everything with PDFs and hide pretty much everything that's a Word document. So PDF filled out, the videos, and then the review. And then every unit is all set up exactly the same for the consistency. The only thing that they'll end up doing other than all their resources for videos and notes and things is discussions. They'll have their initial intro version of it where they have, here's your introduction, here's who you are, responded to people. And then screenshot is they're going to need to be able to have other conversations mathematically, which they're going to find in their detective work, that they're going to need to put in square root symbols and pi and stuff like that. So how do they use the equation editor? How do they get the pictures in? All that sort of stuff. So just to practice it, make sure that it can clear up any questions they may have before they get to the actual, each unit has this detective work. So it's not each week or anything like that. It's each unit. At the end of the unit or somewhere within that unit is detective work, which is a problem that is done incorrectly. And they have to find out what the mistake is and respond to it and fix it and basically describe what happened, what did they do wrong, and then give the correct answer, or how to fix it, and then work through the math to show that. And so there's 2 per unit. And so this was one where they drew the triangle in the wrong quadrant. So really it's just signs that were wrong. This one is an angle of depression that they drew their 19 degrees in the wrong spot, which is pretty common. So we try to pick problems that were things that we saw on tests and quizzes that people have a tendency to make mistakes on. And so if they can get some exposure to seeing other people make mistakes on it, hopefully it'll make them kind of think through their problems a little bit different. So each unit has these, and they're already all open. They just can't access it yet, right? And so this one has an open and a due date. So this one they can get in there and actually put in answers, where this one will open up as soon as the unit 2 opens up. So kind of in the near future, but at least they can see them, which I think is a good thing. And so what they also get to do is when they submit it, they can then have access to other people. So sometimes what happens is a couple students don't really know and see what the mistake is. And so they'll submit the work actually saying, I'm not really sure what the mistake is. And then they can see what other people did. And then they can kind of revisit their post or put a post onto their post saying, I now see, looking at what other people did, and kind of get it resolved. So that's the D2L side of it. Their grades are all set up in here. Here's all their stuff, and it's all done kind of at percentages where certain things are worth certain percentages, which is described on the syllabus. There is a link eventually, or an announcement later on in the semester, towards the end of the semester, that they have access to an Excel file that has this same look, where they can put in all their information of like, how many points do they get in this, and they can start to say, well, what do I actually need in order to get certain grades in it? So they can kind of play with their own numbers rather than reaching out to you and saying, what does it take for me to get this grade in this class? They can do it themselves. So it's all kind of has that similar layout to it. And so grades are there, their discussions are there. We don't do quizzes or assignments because that's all within the Delta Math platform. And so that's what it looks like for a student. Let me click on the Delta Math side of it. So when the students do create their account, here's kind of where the meat of everything is happening. So when they click on the Delta Math, this is what it looks like once they sign up for the class. And if they're only in one class, then this is what it's going to look like. The blue represent assignments that are open, and they're all kind of like open. And you can see that there's a due date down here, and they're usually organized by due dates. So further out we get, further down the list we get, you're going to see the due dates are going to be a little bit further along. They can minimize these, right, as they go through it. Their quizzes are here. So this one has opened, but their next quiz is not available yet because I set it up to not open until a certain time, certain day. So that's not available yet, but then I can close everything else. And then what happens when you get down to the bottom of this thing, these are additional assignments that they can still work on, but they're going to get kind of dinged a little bit of a late credit to it. So they can open those up, work on those problems, and they're going to get penalized only by the ones that they haven't finished. Right. And so depending upon how you set it up, then all of that can be set up different. You can lock them out. Totally up to you. And then at the very, very bottom are the ones that are closed with no opportunity for additional credit. That doesn't mean, especially on homework, that they can't go in and still work on stuff. So if they were really like, I really need some more practice on this particular problem, even if they've gotten their 2 out of 2 and they got their 100% on it and they click on it and to do additional problems, it won't penalize them. Right. So they can still practice. So the ones that are open, what you'll see from a student perspective is when they click on something, they'll have their problem, and they're going to have a couple cool resources. That first off, they got to get 1 out of 1. So they got to get 1 right. That doesn't mean that they're only going to do 1 problem, just means that they got to get 1 right. So that may take them 3 times to get their 1 right, and that's what it takes. But what they're going to see is the majority of the problems are Delta Math created. Like we filtered through and picked specific problems from Delta Math. And if we did, then they have these extra resources where you can click show an example. So and a different problem will come up with the explanation. And so they can kind of see, some of them are interactive, some of them have a lot of colors and different things, but it's basically, give me an example of how to do this thing. And so they can go back to the original problem, which is very useful, or they can watch a video also going through a very similar type of problem. So here's the problem that they're working on, and here's the problem that the video is. And so that resource is there on the majority of the problems, except for some of the problems that we had to create, like some word problems that they just didn't quite have that right style that we were looking for. The ones that we created, you can tell the difference because it's going to be 1 attempt out of 20 rather than 3. So they can get the problem wrong 3 times. And on that 3rd time, they're going to give them the answer, which is going to look like this. So they're going to give them the answer, and they're going to show them what their attempts look like. And then it's going to spit out a new problem. And so they can continuously work through it, unless it's a teacher created one, which the majority are not, but maybe 8% of them, 10% of them at most are teacher created ones. And it says 1 out of 20 attempts. So the 20 is on the teacher side. If they got locked out of a problem, they're not going to regenerate it because it's not a Delta Math created problem, and you have to reset the problem. So we gave them 20 attempts that, they're going to try a couple times, and hopefully, and we tell them, and I do this in the video, kind of the tutorial walking them through, of at some point, stop, reach out and ask a question. That's the point behind it, because you're not going to have the bells and whistles that Delta Math is going to have on the majority of the other problems. So there are some problems that they just need to stop, reach out, ask a question, let's get it resolved. But 90+% of these problems are going to have these extra resources, the help video, the show an example, and it's awesome, right? It's a really, really good thing for them to see and do. So, and each one's going to be a little bit different. They have different pictures, different explanations of how you go through things. So one really cool differentiating thing, like all these platforms all have, just basic problems. The thing I like with Delta Math is it does have a video in every single one, and they're all consistent. Same people doing the same problems all the time, and it looks like their stuff. And then graphing, though, is probably the biggest difference that I see. So when we get to graphs, one thing that you can do is when you graph something on here and you're like, I don't really know how to do this. Oops. then there is this, I can embed as a teacher my own, like I made this video that kind of is going to go with these graphs. And so, and there was just a little bit of a nuance that was different. And so I'm like, well, rather than them trying to fight through it, let me make a quick video, embed it into here, and then the students can kind of get to whatever the problems that they need to get to. So, let me do one thing. I think I've had it open too long. Okay, so so when they get to this and they're graphing something, so here's the biggest differentiation. It's not a multiple choice. It's not a pick the right one or anything like that. It is, we're actually going to graph this. And so you can set up your scale. You can set up this scale. If we're going to do 2 pi as our scale, and then we'll click done. And then I'm going to set up also my scale of like, I'm going to set up my 5 points. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's where my period is. Or I'm going to go every 2 spots, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There's where my period is. And then I'll start plotting points basically to start to graph this thing. And so it's going to do its best guess as to what it's thinking that I'm trying to do. And you can see I've already messed it up. So that needed to be there, right? And so rather than, like, that's to me the coolest thing in Delta Math is that graphing is spectacular on here. Like there are some problems where you're going to graph it by holding the mouse and like doing x-intercepts and things like that. Even like throwing in asymptotes and horizontals and verticals and all these individual pieces. And it's going to take its best guess and go, okay, what do you think? And I didn't do it right. And so I can show an example and what did I do wrong? I maybe messed up the period or whatever the situation is. So this is kind of giving an example. So that's what it looks like on the teacher or on the student side. There's an amazing amount of resources in here. When students do start a test or a quiz or whatever the case is, it's going to kind of lock out Delta Math. So like it will only allow one login basically. So if I'm that student and I logged in, I can't open up another browser and open up another Delta Math and go, oh, here's some example problems that'll help me on my quiz. It won't let that happen. Second thing is also is when I start my quiz, I have an hour and 70, a little over an hour on my quiz. If I start it, the clock is running no matter if I'm in Delta Math or not. So if I close out of it, the clock is still running. So once I start it, I start it. And the reason it's so long is because also I extended time on myself. And so it's already taken that into consideration. This quiz is probably 35 minutes or something like that. And I did something where I extended the time out. And so it automatically is adjusting my individual time where not everybody else is going to see that. So once I start it, it's going to look just like this. I'll go through my problems and then I'll submit my quiz. So, yeah, that's the Delta Math. That's all the different resources. And you can minimize. And remember, the blue is kind of what's still open. The orange has a late penalty, but still open. And then the red is closed. And then all the different resources within it. And so there's also a student help video that kind of, again, kind of the layout of like, how do I find this? How do I find that? And that's all there. So let me go back. So that's the Delta Math part. And this is the D2L part, that the majority of this really is just for announcements and the different resources and the videos and the notes and the discussions that we have going for it. So thank you. And again, my name is Scott Davis, and I am the course lead for Trig. And I also teach pre-calc and doing this video for Patricia Anderson and I for ACC.